this is Brian Rowe with Mythic MTG Tech number 252, doing a blue-black Modern Faeries deck tech. This is a deck that I'm playtesting currently for the upcoming Modern season. I am super happy with it. As you guys know, I've been a red, white, blue tempo player for a while. This is a very different style of deck, and I'm going to get into it. It's been over a year that Bitterblossom has been unbanned in Modern. Bitterblossom started out on the Modern ban list because Wizards didn't want old archetypes that people were already aware of to dominate Modern. And Modern is one of those formats that individuals don't seem to be spending a huge amount of time innovating on. There's some very strong decks out there, and people like to stick with what they already know. So Bitterblossom has not made a huge impact on Modern. People have not been brewing with it the way that I expected when it was unbanned. There's two deck lists that have really brought this deck forward to me, the first of which is from the GP in Philadelphia. We have a top 16 finish here by Anthony Huen. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. This deck is very solid. It has some cool inclusions that I'm going to go into on why I chose to put them in. But it's really brought this deck forward for me, reminding me how good this archetype can be. The other deck list that I was really excited about is a bit older here. This is a 2014 deck list from a Seattle PTQ. This is from Josh, a Magic the Seattling player. This deck list does some things with the mana base that is very different from the previous deck list. In both of these cases, though, we've got some interesting possibilities here and the ability to play a very different game than most people are playing in Modern. Here's the deck list that I put together and that I'm going to present here today. There's some minor changes. I'm going to go through the whole thing. What I really want to emphasize with this deck list is that it's a different type of deck than most people are playing in Modern. This is more of a traditional control deck, a draw-go deck. You do have a Bitterblossom-based possible win condition where you Thoughtseize them and Inquisition them early, and then put down Bitterblossom and then control the rest of the game. You may also win by not playing Bitterblossom early, by controlling the game with some early hand destruction, following that up with counterspells, some flash creatures on top of that at the end of turn, and keeping your mana available to stop their threats. It plays a lot more like a traditional old school control deck than your modern kind of control combos that are trying to just get one or two cards out in the middle of holding on during a game. This deck is a bit of an expensive deck. It runs about $900 right now, and for Modern, that's kind of halfway in between your budget and your most expensive decks. Considering this is a blue-black deck, though, that is actually not that expensive, many of the cards on this list are at very low prices compared to where they were 6 or 12 months before their most recent reprint. Now is a good time to get into this deck. Cards like Cryptic Command, Vendilion Clique, and Snapcaster Mage could easily go up by 30 or 40% during the next Modern season, depending on how much play they see. There are some budget options for creating this deck. You can drop the price about in half by cutting out Thoughtseizes, Cryptic Commands, Vendilion Cliques, and some of the more expensive removal. The deck is not going to be as competitive in this budget version. It turns into a little bit more of an aggro version. The Scion of Una in particular really gives you a faster clock with your fairies there, a little bit less control. Dimir Charm is surprisingly good to me. I've considered main decking a Dimir Charm over a Cryptic Command if I try to build a tempo version of this instead of a control version. Agony Warp is one of the weaker ones here as a replacement. I like it in some situations, but it is definitely nowhere near as strong as Slaughter Pact. Depending on the meta, Duress can actually be better than Thoughtseize. Yes, better than Thoughtseize. Thoughtseize is really bad against those burn decks. And if you've got a lot of burn and a lot of combo that is required particular sorceries or instants, Duress can be better. Thoughtseizing yourself down a few points really hurts you in those aggro matchups and can hurt you in the Scapeship matchup where you're going to have less life. One thing you'll notice about the deck that I'm strongly suggesting based on Josh's older deck is not playing with shocks and fetches. Your burn matchup gets much, much worse. Your aggro matchup gets much, much worse when you're hitting yourself for 3 to 5 damage early on in the first turn or two. The blue-black mana is really amazing in Modern. Darkslick Shores and River of Tears are way undervalued. They are incredible lands. In many, many decks, they are better than shocks and fetches for a third to a quarter the price. Make sure to play some basics in here also. You want to be able to fetch lands when people path to exile your stuff. You also don't want to be in huge trouble with a Blood Moon. 4 basics is probably running it a little bit light. I could see adding 1 or 2 more islands. Blood Moon, though, is not as scary as it sounds in this deck because you have Inquisitions, you have Thoughtseizes, and you have Mana Leaks. You have lots of ways to prevent Blood Moon from never hitting the board. Darkslick Shores is a must in this deck. Having mana that is untapped in the first few turns is very important. There is an edge case where Darkslick Shores is not ideal for you, and that's when you really need that 4th land for Cryptic Command. So make sure to sequence these correctly. It's part of the reason I'm only playing 3 instead of 4 also. River of Tears is way undervalued in the environment. You need more blue in this deck. It's very easy to trigger the black, which you are less likely to need on your opponent's turn. Even without fetch lands, River of Tears usually provides the color of mana that you need, which is blue. Ghost Quarter is an interesting choice in this deck. A lot of people I know are playing Tectonic Edges in this spot. Urzatron is the main reason that I'm playing Ghost Quarter. I want to be able to knock their land out before they ever get to 4. Having somebody resolve an Ugin really early or a Wormcoil Engine can be a nightmare for this deck. Stopping them from ramping is essential here. We have a lot of control in this deck. 3 Cryptic Commands seems like a lot, but in a traditional control deck, once you start to get Cryptic Command rolling, you are in control of the game. This is a wonderful card. Don't cut it down. Mana Leaks are a little bit rougher the longer you go during the game. Spellstutter Sprite I actually like a lot more. I just can't play 6 of them. And Remand is often essential for getting you out of difficult situations. It is the weakest of the counter spells in this particular deck and often gets sided out. I might even consider playing a main deck, a Dispel, dependent on your meta. Bitterblossom is a powerhouse in this deck, and as important is when to cast it, is when to remove it, and how to remove it. You've got both Cryptic Command and Mistbind Clique in here that will allow you to remove your own Bitterblossom. You don't have to die to it. The other thing to remember about Bitterblossom is if you've got it in your opening hand and you've got hand destruction on turn 1, take a look at your opponent's hand. See if it's safe to play the Bitterblossom early. Get it out there and then control the board. The Faeries in this deck are very powerful. There are a lot of 1 casters in the environment. Spellstutter Sprite can counter all of those. Wonderful, wonderful card. Mistbind Clique can often allow you to save your own creature and get multiple uses out of it. So for example, if you've got a Vendilion Clique in play, you can put the Mistbind Clique in play, block, and then get the Vendilion Clique back and use its comes into playability again. Mistbind Clique also acts as a bit of a time walk. Remember to tap down your opponent's lands during their upkeep. This can bridge you into getting into those later turns where you're going to dominate the game. We've got a huge package of hand destruction in this deck. Inquisition of Kozilek and Thoughtseize give us 6 main deck answers to individuals' early threats. Now, if you're playing against a lot of Urzatron, you may want to cut down on the Inquisitions and add more Thoughtseizes. I've got 4 Inquisitions in here because robots, zoo, and burn are all really popular in the Seattle area. Hurting yourself early against those decks can be nightmare. Having the ability to pull out their early threats and stabilize with Inquisition is just so much better. Before going to a giant tournament, I would definitely evaluate the national meta though and see how much combo is out there that is relying on cards over 3 casting costs. Duress is a great budget alternative. Duress can also be very good in a super aggro and lower casting cost combo environment over Thoughtseize. We've got an interesting diverse suite of removal here. Murderous Cut is just amazing. I'm running Snapcasters in here, so I can't run too many. I have considered putting a second one into the deck. Slaughter Pact is just essential for beating some of the twin decks. Dismember is almost as good as Slaughter Pact and can often come out earlier if needed. Disfigure is in here for your Delver type decks. It's one of the weaker removal here, although it also works really well against robots, especially when you're able to snap it back. Go for the Throat is my least favorite removal in the removal package. You just need a little bit more removal that doesn't eat away at your graveyard. And Go for the Throat is great against Zoo, but really bad against robots. Whether you use this or Doomblade is really dependent on what's popular right now. Snapcaster Mage is the honorary fairy in this deck. Incredible card. I've been able to snap back Cryptic Commands, Disfigures, Thoughtseizes, whatever the utility cards you need, being able to play them twice makes them so much better. Great card overall, one that I would definitely leave in this deck. Something else to remember is that Snapcaster is a 2-1 flash blocker. You're a control deck. You're going to do better in the late rounds. Just chump blocking a creature may be the right play with Snapcaster Mage. If you don't live to those late rounds, the Mage isn't going to do anything for you. Consider using him as that flash blocker to keep yourself alive. I know it's going to hurt, it's going to feel bad, but it is occasionally essential to make sure you make it into the later rounds. Another really cool way that I've seen Snapcaster used was against Liliana of the Veil. If you've got a creature in play that you want to keep more, such as a Vendilion Clique that is getting through for flying damage, your opponent drops Liliana of the Veil, you flash in Snapcaster Mage to their sacrifice ability, and then you're able to kill the Lily coming across the next turn. Look for creative plays with Snapcaster Mage. High quality card that the right play is often not obvious. Tasigur is kind of the overlord in this deck. Another honorary fairy. I see him as the godfather.
I can't remember the last time that you invited me to your house for a cup of coffee. Even though my wife was godmother to your only child. But let's be frank here. You never wanted my friendship.
In this deck, when Tasigur hits the board in the control mirror match, you win. When Tasigur hits the board against an aggro deck, you often stabilize. This is my second Delve card in here. There's a little bit of anti-synergy going on with Snapcaster Mages in particular, but having a 4/5 that draws you a non-creature card every time you activate it is incredible in this deck. I really like him as a singleton. The sideboard here is a little bit more dependent on what's going on in your local meta. Damnation is one of the few cards that I would probably never pull from the sideboard. Dealing with those Zerg decks, Damnation is the best option out there. Engineered Explosives is a close second and is strictly better against really low casting cost decks like robots, although Hurkyl's Recall is also a house. I'm playing a singleton Vampire Nighthawk in here. It's great against aggro. It's very good against those small creature decks. It's actually not bad against burn either. Worst case, they just burn it instead of burning you, but if you can get the lifelink on tap, you're going to win those matchups. Sword of Light and Shadow is also very, very powerful against burn decks. Ætherling is probably my least favorite card in this particular sideboard. It's there for the mirror match or for other control decks, 6 casting cost is a lot though. I may consider replacing it with something like Ashiok. Sower of Temptation is incredibly powerful. I could see an argument though for playing Threads of Disloyalty instead if you're dealing with a faster meta. Slaughter Pact and Go for the Throat are both there for the Splinter Twin matchups, and Dispel is there for when you need to take out your removal and play against combo decks, as is Countersquall. You're going to run into some decks where your removal is just bad and you want enough spots in your sideboard to be able to remove all of your removal and dominate the game. You are a control deck, and when you've got 10, 15 counter spells plus Snapcaster Mages, you are going to win against those combo decks. Just to let you guys know what's coming up, I'm working on the Ask Anything right now. I've got a Scion deck tech coming up in January. We've also got patron pack openings happening very soon now and predictions for 2016. I'm also doing coverage of a Pauper tournament called Rags to Riches over at Card Kingdom this Saturday, January 2nd. So if you get a chance to drop by there, it is a sold-out event. We're doing commentary. We're going to be on Twitch. I'd love to hear your guys' comments, feedbacks, that type of stuff. Hopefully joining the Twitch chat and letting me know what you think about the decks and what's going on with the tournament. Very cool prize structure. They're giving away Tarmogoyfs, Bobs, Lilies to the top participants in that tournament. It's now time to choose to subscribe, comment, like, or support the channel on Patreon. Thank you guys so much. Thank you to everybody who's over there on Patreon supporting the channel. I greatly appreciate it. You guys make this channel possible. Thanks.